Now, the medical examiner provided the evidence that managed to showcase that there had not been a rape. The basic issue concerned the breakdown of the semen sample in the initial rape kit, which proved that whatever sexual act was the source of the biological material, it occurred over 24 hours before the arrest on the train. Too early to be from the defendants, based upon the women's own testimony about when they boarded the train. Now, there is no DNA test at this time. Nowadays, these sort of cases could be relatively open and shut if there could be a DNA test done, but that's not what they have. They have you can match blood type, but that doesn't prove much since a great many people have the same blood type. So, even with all of this evidence, an all-white jury still convicted the young men and proclaimed death sentences. Judge Horton, who was the court official presiding over the case, actually met privately with the medical examiner, and he agreed to commute the sentence to life in prison instead of a death sentence. He was rewarded for this in the typical Southern way, in that he would later lose his bid for re-election over the issue. So, Norris versus Alabama. So in 1935, the Supreme Court ended up getting a new set of appeals from the IDL, this time working in concert with the NAACP and other movements. And there was yet another issue. This issue now concerned the fact that Alabama had worked to systematically exclude African Americans from serving on the jury for these Scottsboro 9, as they're sometimes called. Instead, the juries had in both cases been all-white juries. The Supreme Court argued that systematically excluding African Americans from jury selection made fair trial impossible, and thus ordered yet another retrial in the case. So the aftermath, what actually came of this whole endeavor? Well, 5 of the young men were ultimately still convicted, despite all the retrials. 4 were not even charged or otherwise were released. None of the 5 were executed. Many of them received long prison sentences, and at least one of them others had received death sentences, which the governor later commuted to life sentences in 1938. One gentleman actually escaped from prison, made it up to Michigan, where he was picked up by the FBI, but Michigan refused to extradite him down to Alabama. He later was imprisoned for manslaughter due to an unrelated barroom fight in which he managed to kill a man. He later died. This particular gentleman, I believe it was Mr. Powell, he died of cancer in 1952. Eventually, all 9 were pardoned, although this was done posthumously, meaning it was done after these individuals were dead. However, their legacy remains the 2 cases, Powell versus Alabama and Norris versus Alabama, both of which went a long way to securing legal rights for African Americans as well as for those accused of a crime, such as mandating that you had to have the right to, that the county had to provide you with an attorney, and that attorney must be a criminal law attorney, as well as forbidding states from systematically excluding people of color from serving on juries. The national and international attention that Scottsboro, Alabama, and the wider Jim Crow Southern system gained from the case, this negative attention helped to galvanize many behind the movement for civil rights in the United States. So the Scottsboro trial does have a long history that extends well beyond the fate of these 9 African American teenagers and that one fateful day on top of a freight train. So, I hope you found this trial to be an interesting piece of 1930s culture.